Students to another class of BA Part 1 students. We will study from Paper 1 Section B, and as I've mentioned before, in this section you have poets from Indian origin and writing in English. So these works are more close to you, as you can understand the symbols. The language is also simpler, and one such poet which we are going to study in this lesson of Indian origin is Toru Dutt. Toru Dutt was born on 4th of March 1856 and died on 30th of August 1877, and she died at a very young age, but she had studied literature and various languages and had expertise in that. And she was a Bengali translator and poet from the Indian subcontinent who wrote in English and French. And obviously, as you can see from her years, that while she was writing, it was the British rule in India. She is also seen as one of the founding figures of Indo Anglian literature, alongside other poets like Henry Louis Vivian de Rosio and Manmohan Ghosh and Sarojini Naidu. So, what are the themes around which her work revolves? Her poems have a theme of loneliness, longing, patriotism, and nostalgia. She, as I mentioned, died, and you can also see from her date of birth and death that she died at a very young age because of tuberculosis, which has influenced some comparisons of her to the British poet John Keats, who also, a promising poet, died very young because of consumption. Some details about Toru Dutt's biographical account, which we need to know, is that she was born in Calcutta to a Bengali family that had converted to Christianity. As I mentioned, that they were living in times of British rule in India, and they were trying to have these missionary efforts of conversion. The Dutt family was one of the first Calcutta families to be strongly influenced by the British colonial and missionary presence. Like Kamna Das's uh, parents, which we had studied in our last lecture, even Toru Dutt's parents also were keen into writing, and Toru Dutt received this environment in her family of literature. Her father wrote poetry, and mother published a translation into Bengali of a religious monograph. So she was brought up into an environment where she received this uh, deep connection with literature. When she was very young, in her 13-year-old, her family left India, making Dutt and her sister some of the first Bengali girls to travel by sea to Europe. And the family spent some years in Europe, in France and England, and they also visited countries like Italy and Germany. So they had influence of these countries in their growing up years. She was a natural linguist, and in her short life became a proficient person in her both Bengali, English, as well as French, and later on in Sanskrit too. And she has, in a short span of her life, left behind an impressive collection of both prose and poetry. So, what is the poem that is prescribed in your syllabus? Besides the important works such as A Sheaf Gleaned in French Fields, published in 1876, and Bianca or the Spanish Maiden, serialized in Bengali magazine, Ancient Ballads and Legends of Hindustan, which was published posthumously. So, three of her works they are published posthumously. So the poem which is included in your syllabus is the poem Lotus and the Casuarina Tree. Let us see something about this poem Lotus, which has been taken from the anthology Ancient Ballads and Legends of Hindustan, published in 1882. So basically, it's a very simple sonnet. Uh, it's a poem which enacts a type of a fable in which the personified figure of love, that is the god of love, comes to the goddess of Flora, the Roman goddess of flowering plants, and asks her to create the most beautiful flower in the world. So, in the backdrop of this dialogue between the goddess of love and goddess of Flora is this conflict that is going on in the flower kingdom between the two flowers, that is the rose and lily. And love expresses a desire to have a flower that carries elements of both rose and lily, because they are in competition of becoming the for having the first position among the flower kingdom. So what does the god of love say to the goddess of Flora? Give me a flower delicious as the rose, stately as the lily. In her pride, when asked what color the flower should be, love first says rose red, then qualifies this by saying, no, lily white, or both provide. So there is this neck to neck competition between the two flowers, as poets and flower lovers, they both uh, com- praise both the flowers equally. And the poem ends with the Flora, the goddess of Flora, giving love the lotus, a flower that has both elements of the lily's beauty and the rose's beauty. So the poem as such reflects one instance of Toru Dutt drawing a link between European culture and knowledge and Indian Asian culture. So how a small poem, which on the surface seems to be a simple fable, a dialogue between the flora and love, and the competition in the backdrop between the two flowers, and finally the emerging of the flower lotus. So, like a sonnet, the form and the structure of this poem also uh, is a typical Petrarchian sonnet, which has 14 lines, and the octave consists of the 8 lines, and then there is a sestet. The rhyme is A B B A B B A, then C D C C D C. So what happens in the octave or the first 8 line is the development of the backstory of love approaching flora. Flora means the world of plants, plant life, flowers, and all kinds of fruits and flowers. And it also gives us the backstory of the conflict between the rose and the lily. So this happens in the octave. The rose, which is red in color and actually native of Asia, is being used here as a symbol of the ideal of Asian beauty, while the lily, white in color and present in much European imagery, such as coats of arms, is used as a symbol of Europe and the West in general. So, symbolically, the poem is a fantastical dialogue between the mythic figures, but also a serious contest regarding the nature of beauty. So, we also find that the poem resolves itself. Elements of both the Western and the Eastern beauty are united in the transitional figure of the lotus, a classic Indian symbol of beauty, youth, and divinity, because the symbol of our nation, the national flower, is lotus. So, let us first read the poem Lotus, then we will follow the interpretation. Love came to Flora, asking for a flower that would of flowers be undisputed queen. The lily and the rose long, long had been rivals for that high honor. Bards of power had sung their claims. The rose can never tower like the pale lily with her Juno beam. But is the lily lovelier? Thus, between flower factions rang the strife in Psyche's bower. Give me a flower, delicious as the rose, and stately as the lily in her pride. But of what color? Rose red? Love first chose, then prayed. No, lily white, or both provide. And Flora gave the lotus. Rose red died, and lily white, the queenliest flower that blows. So, in a small poem of 14 lines, you find that Toru Dutt, with her expertise and her rich background of Western and Indian culture, has composed this poem. And read it again and again so that you get familiar with some new words, and we will study about the symbolic mythical figures that come in this poem, which is very rich in this. With this, we come to the end of this lesson, and hold on for another lecture in which we will understand the intricacies of this poem. Thank you.